Princess Charlotte had an important royal duty of her own.
Who's the boss? Princess Charlotte. It can be tough being the daughter of the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, not least of which because your life is very public.
Did you know that 7-year-old Princess Charlotte has been described as having the same shy yet fun personality as her grandmother?
He bullied Princess Charlotte. What happens next will leave you speechless. At Lambrook School, known for its long-standing traditions and distinguished alumni, students returned from summer break ready for a new academic term. Among them was Princess Charlotte, daughter of Prince William, and the Duchess of Cambridge. Despite her royal background, Charlotte was admired for her down-to-earth nature and kindness. She joined in every school activity like any other student, never seeking special attention. But what started as an ordinary term soon took an unexpected turn, one that would leave a lasting impression on her. Let's find out how it all happened. During the second week of the term, a new student joined Lambrook. Jasper, a transfer from a different private school, arrived with a reputation he didn't try to hide. He was outspoken, bold, and sometimes disrespectful. Within days, teachers noted his confrontational nature, and some students avoided him altogether. Charlotte, however, had done nothing to attract his ire. She treated him politely, like she did with everyone. But one afternoon, things took a turn. Jasper spotted her walking alone after a class and decided to approach. Students nearby didn't pay much attention at first, assuming it was a casual exchange. But those who overheard bits of the conversation realized quickly that Jasper was taunting her. He made subtle digs, questioning whether she got special treatment because of her last name. He joked loudly about royalty and mimicked a bow. Charlotte didn't respond. She stood still, said nothing, and eventually walked away. Some students laughed nervously, others looked around, unsure what to do. In the days that followed, Jasper seemed to enjoy the attention. His mocking tone became more frequent. He made references during class that weren't overtly offensive but carried a tone of disrespect. Once, when the teacher praised Charlotte's work, Jasper mumbled loudly enough for others to hear, "Of course she did. She's royalty." It wasn't just Charlotte who noticed. A few students began to feel uneasy around Jasper. Even those who initially found him amusing began to withdraw. One student, Emily, said quietly to her friend that she didn't like how Jasper always seemed to look for someone to target. "It's like he enjoys making people uncomfortable," she whispered. During lunch that afternoon, Charlotte sat with her usual group of friends, but something felt different. Though she remained composed, some could sense she was more withdrawn. She didn't mention Jasper or talk about what had happened. It was as though she had decided to carry on as normal, not wanting to make a scene. Behind the scenes, teachers took note. The staff held briefings, discussed classroom dynamics, and kept a closer watch on interactions. The school counselor quietly checked in on Charlotte, but she assured them she was fine. Still, the administration decided it was time to intervene more formally. One of the older students, Thomas, who had seen the incident unfold more than once, felt the need to speak up. He approached a teacher after class and described what he had seen. He wasn't dramatic about it. He was simply just honest. "It's not right," he said. "She doesn't say anything back, but he keeps doing it." That was when the school decided to take real action. And what happened next quickly went viral. Jasper was quietly called into the headmaster's office.
She was quite known for her feisty personality.
Charlotte was also invited to share her experience, and though she didn't dramatize the incident, her words were clear and firm. She wasn't hurt, but she had felt disrespected. What followed wasn't a typical disciplinary hearing. The school maintained a discreet but intentional approach. The headmaster emphasized the importance of empathy and mutual respect. Jasper was asked to reflect on his behavior and write a statement about what respect meant to him, something the school encouraged in such cases, regardless of who was involved. But even after that conversation, something lingered. Jasper's attitude changed slightly, but his presence still carried tension. Some students avoided him. Others whispered behind his back. And Charlotte, while unchanged on the surface, became more quiet in class. By the end of the week, the story had spread throughout most of the school. Students talked among themselves. Some speculated that Jasper would be expelled. Others wondered why Charlotte didn't fight back. A few even began to imitate Jasper, thinking it was a way to be edgy or rebellious. The school environment felt different. One afternoon, during a group project, Charlotte was paired with Jasper by chance. The teacher had split the class into groups without realizing the tension. There was an awkward silence when the two sat together. Charlotte focused on the task. Jasper fidgeted with his pencil. He didn't say much, but at one point, he muttered something under his breath, something only Charlotte could hear. She paused, but didn't respond. Later that day, another student, Anya, saw Charlotte sitting alone on a bench during break. She walked over, sat beside her, and offered her a snack. They didn't talk about Jasper. They just talked about homework, weekend plans, and a new book Anya was reading. But the gesture mattered. It showed that Charlotte wasn't as alone as it might have seemed. The teachers, meanwhile, continued to monitor the situation. The school counselor organized a session for students to talk about respect and kindness. Attendance was optional. Some came, most didn't. Jasper wasn't among them. Over the next several days, Jasper's attitude didn't improve. In fact, it became more calculated. What began as public taunting turned into something more targeted, sharper, and more personal. He had realized that Charlotte wouldn't retaliate, and that only seemed to embolden him. He no longer sought attention from the group. Instead, he targeted her when teachers weren't around, when hallways were quiet, or during moments when no one was watching. In the art room one afternoon, Charlotte was carefully working on a painting. The classroom was mostly quiet, except for the soft clinks of brushes and water jars. Jasper passed by behind her, leaned over just enough so only she could hear, and whispered, "Even your painting looks privileged." Then he straightened, smirked, and returned to his seat as if nothing had happened. Charlotte stared at her brush. Her hand paused. Her eyes didn't lift, but her face flushed a pale pink. She didn't report it. She never did. During PE later that week, students were paired up for a running drill. The teacher called out names. Charlotte and Jasper. A few kids glanced at each other uneasily. Jasper jogged over with that same mocking grin. "Try to keep up, princess," he muttered under his breath. As they started running, he kept pace for a while before deliberately slowing down and then loudly saying, "You know what? You can run alone. You're used to being special." Some students laughed a little, not because it was funny, but because they didn't know how else to react. Charlotte finished the rest of the laps by herself. Her face was tense, but she kept running and never looked back. The next day in the hallway, Jasper brushed past her shoulder, intentionally knocking into her. It wasn't forceful enough to be called aggressive, but it was enough to send a message. "Oops," he said casually, not stopping. In the library, Charlotte was browsing the shelves when she noticed Jasper standing a few feet away, staring at her. When she turned, he mimicked a royal wave and mouthed, "Your Highness." She turned back to the books quickly, pretending not to see him. Her stomach twisted. The worst came one rainy Friday afternoon when students were lining up to board their buses. Charlotte had just opened her umbrella when Jasper passed behind her and muttered under his breath, "Must be nice to have a whole country bend for you." Charlotte glanced back. Jasper wasn't looking at her. He was tying his shoelace. But the comment sank deeper than the others. Something about the way he said it, so casually cruel and harsh that it made her chest tighten. That evening, back in her room at home, Charlotte sat on the floor near her bed. Her school bag rested beside her, unzipped. A notebook had fallen open, but she wasn't reading. Her eyes were glassy. For the first time since Jasper had started his remarks, tears welled up in her eyes. She quickly wiped them with the back of her hand. It wasn't the words, not exactly. It was the slow erosion of comfort, the way school didn't feel safe anymore. She hadn't told anyone. Not her brothers, not her parents. She thought it would pass. Little did she know that it would go on for much longer. One day during lunch, Charlotte found a sticky note on her desk with the words, "Born to be better than the rest? Get over yourself." It wasn't signed, and no one saw who left it. But when Charlotte glanced across the room, Jasper was already looking at her. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. The look was enough. On another occasion, during music class, Jasper muttered something just loud enough for the kids beside him to hear. "I wonder if she gets private lessons from the Queen's choir." The teacher didn't hear it, but two girls sitting in the row ahead did. They didn't say anything. They just glanced at Charlotte, then back at their books. That glance was becoming all too familiar. Then came the science project incident. Charlotte had stayed up the night before, carefully building a small model volcano for her assignment. She brought it to school in a cardboard box and placed it on a table in the corner of the classroom. During break, the classroom was empty. When she returned, the volcano had been knocked over, not shattered but clearly tampered with. The vinegar and baking soda setup had been spilled. A few students crowded around. Someone muttered, "That's awful." But no one said who had done it. Charlotte stood quietly beside the mess, hands clasped in front of her, eyes down. Jasper entered the room minutes later. He looked at the volcano, raised a brow, and said, "Looks like royalty isn't earthquake-proof." Then he walked past her like nothing had happened. Charlotte didn't flinch, but that night she cried again. Not loud sobs, just subtle tears in the dark. In the days that followed, some students started avoiding Charlotte, not out of meanness, but fear. No one wanted to be Jasper's next target. One girl even whispered, "I like Charlotte, but I don't want to get dragged into drama." The isolation deepened. He'd leave subtle notes on her desk, jokes about crowns, lines from nursery rhymes twisted into mockery. Little Miss Royal sat on a throne.
We end tonight with a royal christening. The newest member of Britain's royal family, 9-week-old Charlotte, was baptized in a ceremony filled with tradition.
One day during art, he accidentally spilled water on her sketchbook. When the teacher turned around, he said it was an accident. Charlotte didn't contradict him. One afternoon in the hallway when Charlotte was at her locker, Jasper leaned in and said in a low, flat voice, "If you tell anyone, they'll think you're making it up. Because you're you, and I'm just a kid. No one believes the spoiled ones." He walked away before she could process the words. And that was the final layer of his strategy, not just bullying her physically or emotionally, but making her doubt herself. It wasn't about bruises. It was about invisibility, about making Charlotte feel smaller than the role she carried. By now, Charlotte wasn't just quiet. She was dimmed. Teachers noticed she raised her hand less. Her laugh came less often. She walked more slowly between classes. At home, she became harder to read. She had grown very quiet. Although still polite, still pleasant, but quieter. What happened next will leave you speechless. Normally, such issues would have remained within the school walls, but it happened that Prince William learned of the incident that evening. He made no public outburst. Instead, he made a private visit to Lambrook the next morning. Staff were surprised to see him arrive so early. He requested a quiet meeting with the headmaster and explained that he wasn't there to create a scene, but simply to understand what had happened. After reviewing the school's report and hearing firsthand from staff, William asked to speak with Jasper. Jasper entered the room unsure of what to expect. What followed wasn't a confrontation, but a conversation. William didn't lecture or raise his voice. Instead, he asked questions. He asked Jasper how he was settling into school. He asked about Jasper's past schools, his interests, and what made him lash out. Jasper was caught off guard. He admitted he felt out of place and overwhelmed. He confessed he didn't know how to act around someone like Charlotte. He was trying to be funny, he said, but it came out wrong. William nodded. He shared stories of his own childhood, times when he too had felt like he didn't fit in. He reminded Jasper that respect is universal. He said that Charlotte, like every other student, came to school to learn and make friends, not to be made to feel different because of her family. He told Jasper that it wasn't about punishment, it was about learning. Jasper apologized, not just in that room, but later in person to Charlotte. He asked if she could forgive him. She accepted with a simple nod. There was no royal fanfare, no public apology. Just two students making peace. Jasper apologized. Not just in that room, but later in person to Charlotte. He asked if she could forgive him. She accepted with a simple nod. But something had shifted. Though the moment between them was quiet and unpublicized, the air around Charlotte began to change. Word had started to spread that Prince William had visited the school. No one had the full story, but everyone sensed something significant had occurred. Teachers carried themselves with a new sense of alertness, and some students, especially the younger ones, treated Charlotte with even more respect than before. Yet Charlotte didn't boast or act any differently. If anything, she became more thoughtful, more composed. Some students who had previously kept their distance started talking to her again. Anya, who had once offered her a snack, invited her to join her for a group book discussion during lunch. Thomas asked if she'd like to partner with him for a science project. And Emily, who had been quietly supportive, slipped a kind note into Charlotte's backpack that read, "You handled it all with so much grace. You inspire me." Jasper, for his part, kept a low profile. He didn't become a model student overnight, but he began making small adjustments. He raised his hand in class more often. He participated in group activities without sarcasm. He no longer lingered around Charlotte. And while he didn't suddenly become her friend, he was no longer a source of discomfort. One day in art class, when Charlotte was carefully outlining a landscape with watercolors, Jasper accidentally dropped a palette of brushes near her desk. She flinched, startled. He quickly apologized, not loudly, not mocking her, just genuinely. She nodded, her hand steady as she returned to her painting. Even afterwards, Prince William remained in firm communication with the school administration. He didn't demand changes, but he offered suggestions. A series of student-led workshops on empathy, respect, and inclusion began to take root. These sessions were framed as leadership training, with students encouraged to talk about peer relationships, pressures, and kindness. Charlotte, though hesitant at first, eventually volunteered to lead one session with Anya. Their presentation was titled, "Creating Space for Everyone." Charlotte didn't talk about her own experience in detail, but she spoke about how small words can leave lasting impacts, and how silence, too, carries weight. The session left many students thoughtful. One younger girl raised her hand and said, "Sometimes people are mean because they don't know how to say they're scared." Charlotte nodded, saying softly, "Sometimes they just need to be shown a better way." That day, several students approached Charlotte to thank her. One boy, who had joined Jasper in laughing during a PE class weeks before, apologized for not saying anything back then. "I didn't know what to do," he admitted. Charlotte smiled gently. "It's okay. We all learn." Jasper's transformation wasn't without bumps. There were days he still made the wrong jokes, spoke out of turn, or struggled with patience. But the culture around him had changed. It no longer rewarded his behavior. He started spending time with a different group of classmates who appreciated him when he was sincere. A boy named Felix, who shared Jasper's interest in coding, invited him to join the robotics club. It gave Jasper a space to channel his energy and creativity into something productive. It wasn't long before he and Felix were working together on a design for a new robotic hand, presenting their idea at a school exhibition. Charlotte, meanwhile, found her confidence returning. She began to speak up more in class again. She laughed more freely with friends. She returned to helping with school events, often volunteering at the library or tutoring younger students. One afternoon, she led a reading circle for Year 3 pupils. As she read aloud, the children leaned in, fascinated. When she finished, a small girl asked, "Are you really a princess?" Charlotte smiled and replied, "Sometimes. But today, I'm just your reader." The headmaster, reflecting on the term's journey, decided to implement a new annual event, Respect Week. The idea was to dedicate 5 days each year to building empathy, storytelling, and student unity. The event would feature student speakers, workshops, and collaborative art projects. The theme for the first year was, fittingly, Every Voice Matters. When the week arrived, students decorated the school halls with quotes about kindness and illustrations of what friendship meant to them. One wall was covered in sticky notes, each one bearing a student's anonymous story of a time they felt left out and how someone had helped them. Jasper submitted one. It read, "I used to make people uncomfortable because I didn't know how to be myself. Someone showed me a better way." Charlotte read the note and recognized the handwriting. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. By the time the term ended, Lambrook felt different. Not perfect, but stronger. Students had grown, not just academically, but emotionally. A shift had occurred, seeded in hardship, but watered with grace. And while Charlotte never made a big deal of what had happened, her quiet strength had become part of the school's story. On the last day before holiday break, Charlotte walked through the hallway carrying a stack of books. Jasper passed her going the other direction. For a moment, their eyes met. He gave a short nod. Charlotte returned it. Nothing more. But in that brief, silent exchange, years of lessons were understood. And as the doors to the school closed for the term, Lambrook stood not just as a place of tradition, but as a space that had learned, through one girl's unwavering courage and one boy's difficult awakening, what it truly meant to grow.